And we are back, and it is time for the else words. This is the main topic, um, the main entree for for the evening. And this is an article that we found that I found interesting for other reasons, and Corey shed light onto it. And that is David Ayer pens a message about Suicide Squad reception and the Joker's role. This comes to us from Collider, and a lot of people were giving Suicide Squad flack. I actually enjoyed it. And yeah, David Ayer wrote this big long message, thanking people, and he knew it was controversial. I'm gonna read the first paragraph. Thank you so much. I know it's a controversial film. I really tried to make something different with a look and a voice all its own. He later goes on to say about how he drew inspiration from the insanity of the original comics. And he goes on to talk about um that he regrets some of the choices that he made, especially with the Joker, and that if he could do it over, he would have made the Joker the main villain and engineer a more grounded story. But he goes on and says that he's thankful for the opportunity because he's a high school dropout, and it's one of those, like, you can see how far he sees how far he's come from being like, fuck it, I'm not going to high school anymore, to now he's directing big budget movies and all
and a successful one.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing is there's a level of success that there's an expectation for these cinematic comic to film things that have been happening. But then there's the reality, which is it's not like this movie didn't do well. It was a movie that starred a bunch of characters that nobody had ever heard of, with some decent named actors in it. But for the most part, like Guardians of the Galaxy, didn't have expectations laid down on it when it came out. And it did very well. Did it do as well as Guardians? No. Did it do as well as a lot of the other superhero movies? Not all of them. But what did we expect from this film? Now, the problems that we see from the outside are things like, well, were the characters true to how they are in the comics? Did the plot make sense? Why was the Joker being featured so much in commercials and in magazines, and Jared Leto telling people how he sent people dead rats and shit and used condoms? Why was that being emphasized so much when he was such a small part of the film? And he even says in here, there isn't a secret edit of the film with a bunch of Joker scenes hidden in a salt mine somewhere. He's basically saying that the film that we have is the film as it is. Now, there was a director's cut or something, some special edition that came out that I have not seen that had some extra stuff.
Yeah, there was an extended edition that essentially fleshed out Harleen Quinzel. I will phrase it that way. Fleshed out the Harley Quinn character with her alter ego. Even there's a scene in there that I really like that I sort of wish was in the movies, where it's Harley examining, like psychoanalyzing everyone else on the Suicide Squad. And it reminds me of her in the New 52, in the New 52 universe right now, where, there are scenes where she is doing that, where she is psychoanalyzing everyone because she's, she is crazy, but she's not as crazy as everyone thinks she is.
Now, is that Harley in Suicide Squad or Harley in her own book?
Harley in Suicide Squad where it's used a little bit more.
The characterization between Harley in her own book versus Harley in other things is pretty loose. The changes between them, which is fine. Actually, there's a Harley.
It's in both. Sorry, it is in both because of I forget what volume it is, but the one where they featured Cy Borgman and all that. It was her. I need a job. Well, I'm gonna go be a psychiatrist again and all that.
Yeah, but that's still a little different. I mean, in her own book, she's hanging around talking to a stuffed beaver and making a lot of a lot of, sort of crass jokes like we don't hear.
Sort of crass.
Yeah, but fucking Jimmy and Amanda are writing it, and they're awesome. So I have no problem with it. Read the Pro sometime. That is a damn good comic. But yeah, so I mean, obviously we know that there was some interference, or it's been reported there was some interference from the production company of like, oh, well, the amount of music that was used to just make scenes kind of pop. Also, the weird graphics of any time a character was introduced, and like, here's a little bit of a rundown that looks straight out of VH1 behind the music. Like, oh yeah, remember when fucking Mark McGrath was in this band? That stuff. I mean, that stuff kind of was the we don't trust the filmmaker sort of thing.
Yeah.
Is what it felt like. It felt hammered on. Also, I mean, you got to face it. You're talking about having these characters who have bullets and baseball bats and boomerangs fighting Superman. The premise of the movie is that we're getting these people together because we can control them. So if Superman ever goes off, we have a way of reeling him in. None of these people would reel him in. None of them have that capability, except for the one creature that's part of the team that went batshit crazy and became the bad guy for the movie. So it's weird how it worked out. There's a lot of problems with this film, but I get that, because you're taking something from comics and you're giving it a Hollywood spin, and you need to make stuff exciting for the big screen, and the characters aren't going to get their due because the character of Harley in the film isn't really exactly like Harley in the comics. The character of Deadshot is very little to do with the comics. And like, they also are trying to pitch their universe at the same time. So here's our Batman cameo, and here's our Bruce Wayne cameo at the end, and here's our Flash cameo. Whether or not they make any sense, like Boomerang should be a Flash villain. There should be an established history there, but we don't get any of that in this because we haven't established the Flash really yet.
Yeah, so, and they even that is a little bit of a misstep with that, with a lot of this stuff here, because I mean, yes, we're with the Batman. Batman, he is a well-established. So with all these Batman villains that you have, you can get away with the Deadshot introduction. But there's a line in there where he says, and then the speed guy came out of nowhere, talking about the Flash. It's like, every time I've heard or seen, him in the Suicide Squad comic book, he's gone against the Flash, not I'm robbing this bank, and then all of a sudden here, I don't know why I'm making him sound Jewish. And then all of a sudden here comes the Flash, and I was just minding my own business, robbing my own bank, and all that sort of deal. I mean,
yeah, and you kind of like have to wonder why a guy who's calling himself Captain Boomerang doesn't really do dick with boomerangs in the movie either, except for one time when he uses a remote control one, which isn't a boomerang, it's a drone at that point.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of problems. I think most of it, not all of it, but I think most of it comes from the fact that it was the wrong time to put this movie out in the DC universe as they were filming it. Because in this movie, we're supposed to accept things like, oh, Harley and Joker killed Robin. But we never saw that. We don't know anything about a Robin in this universe. And now apparently we never will. It doesn't really work. It's a lot of things that are just kind of said. It's shown the aftermath without a context to attach to it, so we don't get a feeling for these characters or the characters it's supposed to be attached to from the other movies. We just barely seen Batman and Superman duke it out in the streets with one woman showing up and saying, "Oh, hi, guys, I got a sword," and that's about it. So I get why it didn't work, but I have to say that one, I didn't hate this movie when we reviewed it before. I just thought it was okay. It was enjoyable. It was the people up on the screen were enjoyable to watch. As ridiculous as everything was, as forgettable as the villains were, or the plot, however it was somehow resolved at the end, it somehow came together, whether or not it made sense. All of that aside, it was at least something that I didn't hate myself for watching it when it was all said and done. It's not something I'm jumping up and down to go watch again, but I get it. And I think that from that context, he did a good job, you know, working with someone else's story and someone else's characters and everything else. But more than that, he shows humility. He says, yeah, it could have been better. I would have liked to have made it better in hindsight. You know, not even saying like, oh, well, they dicked me over. Like the Fantastic Four thing of, oh, well, they took my movie and they ripped it to shit. And so that's why it sucks. Well, no, they were working with your stuff. So your Fantastic Four movie had shit available. I don't know what really could have been done with the footage you have. But this guy isn't like that. One, he's not pissing off the people that he works for, saying, please don't ever hire me again. But two, he's honest. I really appreciate that in this day and age. For someone to not be the, I think I'm awesome, and you're all wrong for not thinking I'm awesome, it's nice to see this perspective.
Now, what would be the difference between this and something like with George Lucas re-editing and rejiggering the original trilogy all the time? What's the difference between that? Because
George Lucas did it to himself.
Yeah.
George Lucas chose to break his existing beloved movies, his beloved trilogy, and said, oh, but I can make them better somehow. But he didn't. And he can't see past that as the fans who've watched those movies and loved them for years are like, please give us our original movies. He could not see past his own ego. Sorry, George, to say, all right, here, you know, for the people who want the originals, here's the originals. And for the people who want the trounced up ones, here's the trounced up ones. And for people who want the prequels, you're fucking nuts. Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, you can have those too. I think that George got to a point where he didn't see that he was making his own mistakes, but it was his mistakes. Nobody was telling George what to do in those cases. Yeah. And that's why I think the original trilogy probably works better than the prequels, is because he had other people he was working with at the time.
Fair enough. I don't know. That was the only thing I could think of as a comparison, because I mean, usually it's like, I like this attitude that he has, that David Ayer has, because that sort of tells me, you know, like he has that artist's personality of like, it's never quite finished. But at the same time, it's sort of like, well, why didn't we get that?
Yeah, I mean, there is a point in time where you have to let art live as its own thing. You know, you're gonna have to walk away. You're gonna have to. I can't edit the story anymore. I have to put it out there. I can't make this film any better. Or it's been 10 years and the movie's existed. I can't or shouldn't go back and change it now. I think that's something that every director, writer, composer, whoever has to kind of deal with. Is you're always going to think, oh, if only I'd done this, it would be better. But that's how you learn and make the next thing. It's not a matter of going and revising history, unless you're killing Hitler. Because I want a burger. It's what you do to become a better artist going forward. And I think that this guy gets that. I think this guy seems to have the right handle on it. He's not Zack Snyder saying, oh, well, fucking, but it's gonna be cool and shit that Batman and Superman fight, and that this fucking kryptonite staff gets thrown into the water just to be retrieved from the water 5 minutes later. Drama. And you guys are all butt hurt because I'm so cool. No, Snyder, your stuff isn't cool. And that's why everybody else in WB right now, in regards to films, keeps saying, we're going to go lighter. We're going to have comedy. People are going to smile and stuff. It's like, he's the only one who hasn't said that yet.
Yeah.
He might do it. It might happen. But I feel like that's another thing, too, is that Ayers took heat that was probably not as necessary to land on him, because of the problems that were already going on with the Snyder films.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you in the fact that I like this was too soon. The Suicide Squad movie was too soon in happening for many reasons, but the big reason of there was a lot more humor in here, and when you're coming from Batman versus Superman, which not very it's there's humor in it in other ways. Um the emo redheaded Lex Luthor, um I see that. I could
You know
see
what's
like
funny is that Luthor works contextually in Suicide Squad better than in Batman v Superman.
yeah.
Whereas possibly Amanda Waller works better contextually in Batman v Superman than she did in Suicide Squad. It that's the thing is like I don't know that they're sure where to utilize their things the best. And Joker, I don't know where Joker belongs. The way that he was portrayed in this film, it's still like it's. I think it's heartening and also disappointing at the same time that Jared Leto is still posting Joker stuff, and like they may be utilizing him somewhere down the road in the film universe, even though all the kind of things blew up after Suicide Squad and his parts of it seemed to disappear. Um, I appreciate the fact that they aren't giving up on him. I like Jared Leto as an actor in a lot of things,
Yep.
but I think his Joker was such a misfire. To double down on it is going to be difficult to accept.
I could see them doing something if they were to take a storyline from the comics. I could see them doing the from the Batman Rebirth where they had shown that it was three people playing the Joker. Essentially, I could see them doing something like that.
That's a hedge your bets thing, which is already ridiculous in comics. I don't want to see that happen in the films. Uh,
Yeah.
and the same thing with Luthor. Again, I don't hate the actor. I did not like
Well,
the portrayal of Luthor that they had him play,
yeah.
that they chose him to play. At any point in time, the director and writer could have said, "Wait, this is not working the way that we thought it should. Maybe we should back off on this a little bit and try to reconfigure things or trade up." But I don't know then how you take what is even by the fans looked at as the one of the worst parts of Batman v Superman and move forward with that in the next film.
Yeah.
It's tough because these movies are not made to stand on their own. These movies are made to build a long line of films. And you kind of have to live with the results of when you screw up at the beginning. How do you clear that up? How do you make that work later on? And they got lucky that when Green Lantern screwed up, it wasn't already tied into their giant universe of movies. They just like, okay, we're gonna walk away from that Green Lantern movie, and we're gonna go over to the Superman movie and hedge our bets on that. And I don't know if that's necessarily better. I mean, in my opinion, it's not been great, but it's tough to then say, no, 10 films already on the docket. But all the problems you've had with the first three, we're totally gonna make them okay again. Trust us now.
Yeah.
That's hard. That's hard to do. And I'm saying it from the outside. I'm not the one making any of these movies, so it's real easy to judge when I don't have my shit on the line like they do. So I get it. It's tough.
Yeah.